All right, so get ready because this time on our deep dive, we're heading into some pretty unexpected territory. I mean, we're talking about Lord Voldemort, like straight out of Harry Potter, the darkest wizard ever, and comparing him to Michael Jackson, the king of pop. Like, what?
Yeah, it's definitely not our usual pairing, but that's kind of the exciting part, isn't it?
Yeah,
Finding these weird connections between people we think we've got all figured
I
out.
know, right? And you sent over this research, Se pegó el texto, which lays out a pretty convincing argument that there's actually a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't even about like finding perfect matches between them. It was more about using this comparison as I guess you could say a lens, a new way to look at the motivations, maybe even the anxieties
Mhm.
that drive these larger than life figures.
It's like we're holding up one of those funhouse mirrors, right? Everything is a little distorted, but that distortion shows you something new. And I gotta say, one of the first things that pops out from this comparison is how both Voldemort and Michael Jackson dealt with, well, appearance.
Totally. It's more than just like vanity, though, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about this deep-seated need to control their image, almost like they're trying to sculpt how the world sees them.
And they both go to some pretty extreme lengths to do it, too. Voldemort, I mean, he's literally chasing immortality, trying to cheat death itself with dark magic.
And then you have Michael Jackson, who's using, well, very different methods, obviously, cosmetic surgery, to constantly, I don't know, refine, reshape his features. It,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder if, like, aging, just getting older, represented this loss of control that they just couldn't handle.
And that makes me think about how much both of them seem to crave control, like in almost every single part of their lives. I mean, Voldemort, with his iron fist over the entire wizarding world, ruling through fear and intimidation.
And Michael Jackson, well, he might not have been out to conquer nations or anything, but he built his own kind of kingdom, right? Neverland Ranch,
Yep.
his own personal escape, a place where he made the rules and could shut out all the noise and scrutiny from the outside world.
You mentioning escaping scrutiny is interesting because there this element of isolation with both of them, right? Like Voldemort hiding in the shadows, surrounding himself with followers who were just as isolated as he was, and Michael Jackson, I mean, here's a guy who was globally famous, but he still seemed to retreat more and more into himself, into this world that he created.
And it's in those worlds, those spaces where they had absolute control that things get really interesting. Because, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but the research actually connects their appearances, specifically their noses, to the public personas they built for themselves.
I know, right? It seems like what a weird comparison to make, but Se pegó el texto is saying that their noses, like Voldemort's and Michael Jackson's noses, almost became like symbols of who they were in the public eye.
Okay, now you got to explain that to me. I'll be honest, when I first read that part, it went completely over my head. What's with the whole nose symbolism thing? All right, so picture Voldemort. He goes through this whole transformation, right, using dark magic, and he ends up with this, like, snake-like nose, practically non-existent.
Hmm.
It's almost like you're seeing his descent into evil, this loss of his humanity, right there on his face.
So it's not even just about like looking different, it's about looking straight up inhuman, right? Like he's crossed some line and there's no going back.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, you've got Michael Jackson. And his nose, I mean, it was this constant source of fascination. People couldn't stop talking about it. And every surgery, it seemed like it just became more refined, narrower. It became like the defining feature.
It felt like everyone had an opinion about how he looked, especially his nose.
And that's where this research draws this, well, pretty fascinating parallel, actually. Because both these guys, in totally different ways, of course, they use their appearance, but specifically their noses, to cultivate a certain image, Voldemort, the monstrous villain everyone should be terrified of. Michael Jackson, he's the otherworldly, like, almost untouchable king of pop who's going to stay eternally youthful.
Whoa. When you put it that way, it really makes you wonder how much of their public image was like deliberate, even manipulated, just to get certain reactions out of people. Kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, it is kind of unsettling. And I think it goes back to this need for control that we were talking about before. By controlling the way they looked, they were trying to control like the whole narrative, how the world saw them.
Okay, so this next part, it's definitely a little more delicate, but it's something we can't shy away from, especially since it comes up in Se pegó el texto, and that's their relationships with children.
Right. And it's, a really complicated issue, one that needs a lot of nuance. I mean, on the one hand, you've got Voldemort, who clearly saw children as like pawns, tools to be used in his quest for power, manipulating them, exploiting them. He even uses them in his army of Death Eaters.
It's chilling when you really think about it, especially like his obsession with Harry Potter. Here's this kid, and all Voldemort sees is someone he can use, someone to manipulate for his own gain.
Then you've got Michael Jackson, who, it's well documented that he had this very real love for children. And Neverland Ranch, with the amusement park and the zoo, I mean, it was practically designed to be a kid's paradise, a place where, like, innocence and wonder were everything.
But then you have the accusations against him, and we can't just, gloss over that. That's a really, really troubling part of his story.
Yeah, and it forces us to face this really difficult thing, and that's that a person can be capable of incredible love, but also capable of causing incredible pain. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's something we have to wrestle with when we try to make sense of his legacy.
So how do we reconcile those two sides? The Michael Jackson who brought so much joy to like millions of people with his music, with the Michael Jackson who was accused of these awful things.
That's the million-dollar
Yeah.
question, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, there might not be an easy answer, but maybe, just maybe, the act of asking that question, of sitting with how uncomfortable and contradictory all of this is, maybe that's a step in the right direction.
It's easy to get caught up in all the flashy parts, right? With Voldemort, it's the magic and the dark arts. With Michael Jackson, it's the music, the dancing, all of that. But the thing that sticks with me, and Sepigul Texto talks about this too, is legacy. And not even just for these two, but like what it means for everyone.
It's wild how both of them, Voldemort and Michael Jackson, they kind of represent this weird sort of duality. Like, they did these incredible things, left these huge marks on the world, but there's this shadow side, this darkness you just can't escape.
And it makes you think about how we deal with that as people. I mean, can you separate the art from the person who made it? Can you appreciate the good stuff without, I don't know, excusing the bad?
It's something that comes up all the time, right? Not just with these two, but with historical figures, politicians, even people we know personally. How do you reconcile those flaws, those mistakes, with whatever good they might have done?
Reading Sepigul Texto, it was like, I don't know, something clicked in my brain. I'm looking at everything differently now. Even the books I read, the music I listen to, it's kind of freaking me out, honestly.
But maybe that's the whole point, right? To shake things up a little. These deep dives, they're supposed to make us question what we think we know, make us see things from different angles, even if it gets a little uncomfortable.
So what now? I mean, we've uncovered all these uncomfortable things, not just about Voldemort and Michael Jackson, but about how we see people in general. What are we supposed to do with that?
I don't think there's a single right answer, But maybe it starts by just acknowledging that it's complicated. Like, people aren't just good or bad, they're a mix of everything.
Embracing the gray areas, right?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe, just maybe, by really wrestling with these questions, by trying to understand people as messy and complex as Voldemort and Michael Jackson, we might actually learn something about ourselves in the process.
No doubt about that. I've got a lot to unpack after this one. But we want to hear from you. What do you think about this comparison? How do you reconcile amazing talent with serious flaws? Hit us up on social media and let's keep this conversation going. And until next time, happy exploring.